From losing one of his best fighters, to unsuccessfully stalling him from dropping out earlier, here's why Dana White will regret losing Francis Ngannou. Being the best heavyweight in the world, the Cameroonian is a money-making machine. One of the biggest consequences the UFC will face from all this drama is losing one of the biggest high-profile names on its roster, not to mention one of its greatest MMA fighters in the heavyweight division. And while trash-talking sure is an effective way to spread buzz among the audience, nothing sets them off more than a well-placed, brutal knockout. And no one can beat the Predator at that game. The MMA has yet to see a power puncher of Ngannou's caliber. And MMA coach Firas Zahabi even has a term for his talent. He calls it the touch of death. Wait, did anyone else feel a chill go down their spine? The president of the UFC, Dana White, even commented that getting hit by Ngannou's punch was like being slammed by a Ford Escort. Now that's something you'd never want to go up against. Going up against similar, top-tier heavyweights, Francis's highlight reel is filled with flawlessly delivered, thrilling knockouts, which fans are crazy for. Not only does his incredible punching power make him an exciting fighter, but being a Cameroon native meant he could have played a key role in the UFC's plans to expand into Africa. The promotion has just taken a major loss by ending things with the 36-year-old, and they can wave goodbye to a significant portion of their clout as well. The MMA artist was a big deal in the UFC, and his absence has left a gaping hole in the title of the champion. UFC commentator Joe Rogan even mentioned that his exit will lead to fans being deprived of some of the best top heavyweight fights. This just goes on to show how impactful he was. Not to mention, the promotion just lost one of its biggest fights, the Jones vs. Ngannou matchup. So it's no surprise that Rogan feels the fight falling through is one of the UFC's biggest tragedies. But while this may be bad news for the UFC, it was a huge opportunity for other companies to snatch up the heavyweight while they had the chance. As soon as Ngannou's departure from the UFC was confirmed, everyone knew whichever promotion successfully coaxed him into their ranks would make a steal. And the PFL has just bagged one of the best fighters they'll ever get their hands on. One of the UFC's greatest selling points is that it hosts the world's best fighters. But now that the Predator's no longer under its wing, he's taken the heavyweight climax with him. Ngannou never had a thing to worry about. Wherever he went, the views would follow him, which means he's a huge asset to the PFL, because they're gonna make some major bank from now on. It also gives them some superiority over the UFC, since it'll be able to boast about having some thrilling heavyweight fights under its banner. To top it all off, the UFC has just lost that claim forever, unless they've got Ngannou cloned somewhere in there. Since the Cameroon native left on pretty bad terms with the president, there's no way he's ever going back to the promotion, and even turned down an offer that would have made him the highest-earning heavyweight fighter in UFC history. He was extremely fed up with the promotion's restrictions and said that he felt trapped under its rigid rules. Now, after exterminating his contract, you'd think the two would have gone their separate ways and called it a day, right? Unfortunately, no. White's still not over the whole situation, and has decided to cope by trash-talking him every step of the way. He said that Ngannou was impossible to deal with, and that he'd never be welcomed into the UFC again. Their troubled relationship only continues to get uglier. The president shared his opinions on the fighter's recent high-profile signing with the PFL. In a nutshell, he dissed the guy for being too afraid to fight. That's peak fan behavior, to be honest. Speaking from his experience of working with the Predator, White said that the deal was completely illogical, and that the 36-year-old still wants to play it safe. He also said that he knew this would happen the day he was released from the UFC. The guy just doesn't want to take any chances, just like with Jon Jones. But now that Ngannou is moving on from his previous promotion, he ain't taking no more drama from his former boss. He fired back at White after his lengthy speech at the UFC Vegas 73 presser. And yeah, he was pissed. He asked the 53-year-old what his deal was, since he completed his contract and chose to walk away. It's not like White released him from under his wing, so he has no right to keep yapping about him every time he feels like it. He also spoke about how the UFC president keeps on mentioning he doesn't take risks, while he defended his title to fulfill his contract with practically no ACL or MCL. Ngannou famously fought and defeated Cyril Gane at UFC 270 with a grade 3 MCL tear, a damaged ACL, and a damaged MPFL. I mean, that's commitment. He continued to fire back at White's comments on his inactivity in the UFC and mentioned that he was the reason he fought 3 times in 3 years, since he wanted to hover over all his deals. The fighter never said no to any of the fights that came up. The former UFC champ just can't seem to shake the president off his tail, he said. I'm finally getting paid and respected, and have a deal that's fair and equal for all parties. Why are you so against me being free and happy? His deal with the UFC is done and over, so it's high time his ex-boss backs off. But despite all this drama, the MMA artist's manager revealed that he almost rejoined the promotion, except that he wanted it to be on the right terms. A lot of people accused him of trying to chase after money, but that's just stupid. The Predator was offered the biggest contract apart from McGregor, but he turned it down because money isn't the main factor. However, he admitted that there was a lot of miscommunication during the negotiations, and things could have been settled very differently than the terms Ngannou left with. Although he has a lot of respect for White, he's gotten involved in some fights with the president himself, so there was no way his team was going to bend over backward to make them comfortable. He said, "At the end of the day, you have to make smart business decisions to put your client in a position to succeed." And after 4 months of being a free agent, the Cameroonian has officially signed with the PFL in a one-of-a-kind deal. It allows him to compete in MMA and pursue boxing at the same time, something he wasn't allowed to do in the UFC. In addition, the deal also made him a minority equity owner, a member of the PFL Advisory Board, and the chairman of PFL Africa. He had all of his demands met. Meanwhile, he had to struggle in the UFC because they had complete control over his career. The 36-year-old has bagged a contract that is unlike any seen in MMA history. But it makes sense because this guy is the highest paid heavyweight ever, and so any promotion besides the UFC wouldn't think twice about taking him under their roster. According to Martin, the deal shocked him too. With the way it's structured, it's a huge game changer. Who'd want to stay in the UFC after that? Ngannou was miserable in that promotion, and as it turns out, the UFC stalled him from dropping out earlier. His manager revealed that if the promotion had kept the Cameroonian busy with a steady schedule, he could have been a free agent much sooner. He could have been done with his contract over 2 years ago. But since the UFC was so uncooperative, it was extremely difficult for them to land any fights at all. And with Francis's impeccable reputation, it wasn't like they didn't have any opponents to choose from. But the UFC always just shrugged him off. It was super frustrating, and they couldn't secure a lot of matches because of it. We didn't even get to see a Ngannou versus Jones matchup, although the two continue to hurl insults at each other through social media, despite Francis having dropped out from the UFC. The talks failed for a variety of reasons, including Jones demanding more money for it, and needing more time to properly transition from light heavyweight to heavyweight. It got to the point where people started attacking the Predator and accused him of being a lazy bum who didn't want to fight, but after a while stopped trying to counter those rumors because there was no point arguing with the online trolls. Both he and the UFC knew that they were actively pursuing fights all the time, and who was stopping them from progressing further. So, from stalling him from dropping out of the UFC earlier to losing one of his best fighters, that's why Dana White will regret losing Francis Ngannou.